mighty dwarf kingdoms, long thought diminished, are resurgent under their high king.
Hello and welcome to another Total War Warhammer guide. Today we are looking 2 units of the meat and potatoes of the Dwarf army. Basically we're talking about the miners. They're different flavoured brethren, the miners with the blasting charges. We're then looking at Dwarf Warriors and Dwarf Warriors with the great weapons. So each unit comes in 2 flavours as such. The biggest single difference between these 2 units is that the miners have Vanguard, meaning that they can deploy using this white line instead of using this yellow line. So they can even go around the back of an enemy or something like this. So let's have a look at the stats in detail, talk about the differences and how you'd use them in battle. So they're armed with pickaxes. They are armoured because they're dwarfs. They do armour. They do armour piercing damage with those pickaxes, and they're good against gates, which is an interesting one. There's not many units like this. So when you're sieging castles and stuff, if you run out of a siege equipment or they get destroyed, you can still chop through them pretty quick with these pickaxes. They come in units of 75. All of these 4 units do. They have 4,575 hit points. I imagine it's the same. So yeah, tiny bit less, that makes no difference, as the Warriors. They have very good leadership at 68, 80 armour, very slow. Obviously they are sharp talking now, they're shouting away. Melee attack of 18, defense of 16, weapon strength of 22. And you see a breakdown 5 and 17 armour piercing there. So charge bonus of 6. Dwarfs aren't chargers. I'll tell you that now. Most of you're sitting there shooting at them, using your artillery, letting them come to you. So obviously they have magical resistance because they are dwarfs, and they have that vanguard deployment we talked about earlier, and they can also hide in a forest. So the main difference between these 2 units is that they're pretty much identical. I think in fact they are identical in every stat, apart from they have a one-off weapon, which is called a blasting charge. It only has 1 ammunition. It's got a very, very short range. So this is literally as you're about to be charged or as you're about to charge. It does 55 damage, but it's splash damage. So explosive base damage is 30. Explosive armor piercing damage is 12. It's only a one-off thing. It's not like a game changer, but it's kind of a fun little whittles down the enemy a little bit, lowers their morale just before you get into the fight. So they're obviously an upgrade on the miners, but nothing that you'd have to replace every unit in your army because you wanted to. Oh, what am I doing there? What am I doing? What am I like? It's like middle of the night when I'm recording this, so that's my excuse. I've been watching E3. Right, next up we're going to look at the Dwarf Warriors. Classic Dwarf Warriors. So they're armoured and shielded, meaning they take less missile damage and less normal damage. One of the biggest benefits about the basic dwarf unit, which this is that they have a charge defense against larger foes, meaning they take less damage. It negates that enemy's charge if they're larger than it's a horse or larger counts as a large foe. So they have a tiny bit more hit points. We'll sort of flick between the 2 units so we can see. So let's have a look. So 80 armor, leadership 70 as opposed to 68, speed is the same. The Warriors have melee attack and defense 22-36 as opposed to 18-18, so they're a little bit more attacky and much better defense than the miners. They're not armor piercing. Even if a little tip, even if a unit says they're not armor piercing, if you go into the weapon strength, you'll often see that it does have some armor piercing. But obviously that's much more on the weapon damage scale. And they have a charge of 9, which is pretty much average for dwarfs. They have the magical resistance. They have that charge bonus against large units, and they can hide in the forest. So the other option to have your dwarfs is to get rid of the shield and give them a 2-handed axe, a beautiful war axe. Their stats stay pretty much similar. Obviously they're not shielded, so they're going to take a little bit more damage from missiles, and they don't have that charge defense against larger foes with the guys with the sword or shields, but they make up for that in that they do much more armor piercing damage. So let's have a look at the breakdown. So 7 weapon down and 21 armor piercing, which is very nice. And they have a decent charge for dwarf. 16 charge bonus is actually pretty good. You might not believe me, but they're actually pretty good. So obviously the first 2 units of miners, should we set them up in the forest? Might as well use their vanguard. And we'll start a battle against some poor Bretonians just while we talk about how to use them in battle. So the good thing about miners is that obviously they're Vanguard deployment. Unlike most Vanguard units in the game, they are fucking slow as fuck. So you've got to be very careful with not leaving them too stranded, because they can't really run away, and it's going to take a while for backup to arrive. So I like to use them as sort of scouting units like I am now, so I can spot the enemy coming in, wait until they engage, and use these miners as rear charges and stuff like that. For the purposes of this, what we're going to do is we're going to use our blasting charges. I'm not going to sort of play properly, we're just going to sort of charges. Other than that, if you don't want to use their Vanguard, they're still very valid sort of meat and potatoes unit in the main battle line with all your other troops. You can still use them that way like you would the Dwarf Warriors. Obviously the great weapon guys, they hit slower, so they're worse against units like, you know, standard goblin unit or something like that, because their swings of the axe take a lot longer to cleave each goblin head off. But they obviously are much better at going after armoured units, so those Reichsguard Knights, those bigger units, they're really, really good against. Actually, I'll take that back. Reichsguard Knights is a bad example. Let's see some blasting charges in action. This is quite a fun little animation. They're getting ready, boys. We're getting ready for the blasting charges. They're coming into range. Blasting charges at the ready. So this is basically what they... I love the way they just lob them in. So that is a hefty amount of damage, but even more so, that morale loss there, straight away. There's the rest of the unit firing in. That is amazing. So like, you saw that there was more than one shot there, but that's because each you know, you've got 75 of these things. Not all of them went on the first throw, let's say. So they're still sort of chucking away. There's all the ammunition gone now. But look at the damage, the carnage that did. Like I said, if you imagine this, if you had 4 or 5 units of these blasting charges as your main front unit, as your main front line of your battle force, that initial blasting charges will do a crap ton of damage, and then you get involved. They're not as fighty as the warriors, so maybe you have like a warrior unit, then a miner, then a warrior, then a miner, then a warrior, then a miner. That could be a way of doing it, but my personal preference is, like I said earlier, is to use the warriors as part of your main battle force, use the great weapons to go after the armoured troops, etc. I'd vanguard these in the trees somewhere or down a hill so they can't be spotted, and then what I'd do is wait until the 2 big battle lines have committed to each other, and then just either go in for a flank charge or go after those other units that are, you know, an artillery crew or that sort of thing, because you haven't really got many speedy, other than gyrocopters. If you don't have them in your army, then these are your best bet to go missile hunting and sort of artillery crew hunting, which you will need to do in the game a lot because you get murdered by all those things. But they are very, very effective. Those satchel charges, they're not called satchel charges, are they? What they should, I've totally forgotten what they're called. Blasting charges, but they are satchel charges. Are stupidly effective. Like, even if you're not killing them off, that initial morale hit means they're going to be so much easier to break. Thank you very much for joining me, guys. Hope you enjoyed this little mini guide. Hit that like button if you did, and join me for the next video. Thank you, guys. Bye bye.